Okay, let's unpack this because this story truly has, well, everything you could imagine. Picture this. You've got a Nigerian lady, Jennifer, her face just frozen in shock in a courtroom photo. Then that image is everywhere online, right, with this huge caption, "Not expected." And here's the kicker, a judgment, a massive fine of 450,000 or 7 years in jail, all because of a tent fare payment. Now, tent fare, that's short for transport fare. And in this case, it was 150,000 she'd received. It's head spinning, isn't it? So our mission in this deep dive is really to unravel this incredible saga, Jennifer and Emmanuel. We're going to try and meticulously pick apart the legal side of things, the nuances, and also that explosive public reaction. What does it all tell us about, well, modern justice and this unstoppable force of viral culture? Our main source here is a really compelling news report from Tell Magazine. It lays out the case. The online aftermath is quite detailed. But we're also looking a bit wider, exploring the general legal landscape, maybe some potential defenses, counter-arguments, what could have been said. It's just such a bizarre, fascinating case. Started seemingly private, then boom, severe legal ruling, national meme. Okay, so let's jump straight into the heart of it. Jennifer facing this huge fine, 450,000, or the alternative, 7 years behind bars. That's serious. And the charge, breach of promise. What was the promise? Well, that she'd visit Emmanuel after getting 150,000 from him for the transport. Now, when you look at that initial sum, 150,000, and then the punishment 3 times that amount, plus potential jail time, it just immediately makes you ask, how on earth does an fare payment escalate to that? The disproportionality, it's just astounding. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The internet, it just absolutely exploded. Jennifer's expression in court, totally stunned, captured in that photo with "not expected" slapped on it. It didn't just become a sensation, it was instantly part of Nigeria's meme dictionary. Like overnight, you see it everywhere now, right? Jokes about relationships, betrayal, even people losing bets on football. It's really taken off.
What's so fascinating here is just the sheer speed. How fast a single moment, a raw human expression, can become a cultural touchstone, and how it can completely hijack the public's engagement with a legal case. Often, before people even get the full story, the legal details, that image has already framed the narrative. It sparks this massive discussion, often with humor, sometimes quite pointedly, and that then feeds back into how people see the whole situation. It's a powerful example of how virality can shape public understanding, or misunderstanding sometimes.
That virality definitely ramped things up, didn't it? So let's get specific.
Yeah.
What was Emmanuel actually claiming? His side was, Jennifer got $150,000 for transport to visit him. Point blank, she never showed up. And that failure to visit, that was the specific action that led them to court.
Right. And this immediately brings up a really important legal question for us. What exactly constitutes a breach of promise in this specific context? Usually when we talk about breach of promise, especially financially, it tends to be more of a civil matter, a dispute over a contract, maybe damages. But the judgment here, that huge fine, 450,000 or 7 years in jail, that really suggests potential criminal implications. It pushes it way beyond what you normally think of as a simple civil disagreement about money.
Exactly. That's a critical difference, isn't it? Because for most people, this sounds like a casual arrangement, maybe a misunderstanding. Certainly not criminal. So what usually keeps a social agreement from being legally binding? What's the usual line?
Well, traditionally, social agreements aren't seen as legally enforceable because they often lack the intention to create legal relations. That's the key phrase. For something to be a proper binding contract, you typically need clear elements, a specific offer, an unambiguous acceptance, and consideration, something of value exchanged by both sides. Now, the being 150,000, that clearly looks like consideration from Emmanuel's side. But was the promise to visit concrete enough? Was it understood by both as an accepted offer carrying legal weight if broken? That's the gray area.
And the amount itself, 850,000, is that sum typically significant enough to trigger this kind of severe legal intervention? It feels like such a jump.
Precisely. That's where the boundaries get so blurred and, frankly, contentious in a case like this. The specific laws in that jurisdiction, how they interpret intent, the nature of that promise, all of that would be absolutely critical. Now, looking at Emmanuel's side, even if the source doesn't spell out his exact legal strategy, we can make some educated guesses. The most straightforward argument would likely be breach of contract. He could argue that by accepting the money, with the clear understanding she was meant to visit, Jennifer entered into an agreement, maybe implied, maybe explicit, an agreement which she then broke. So he'd be seeking damages, perhaps for the money lost, maybe even the disappointment, though that's harder.
Okay, that makes sense as a potential civil claim, breach of contract. But again, that jump to the severity we saw, the potential criminal aspect. What hurdle does Emmanuel face trying to argue something like, say, fraud?
That's a really good point. Because the leap to proving criminal intent, like fraud or obtaining money by false pretenses, is significant. It's a much higher bar. Emmanuel wouldn't just have to show she didn't visit. He'd need to convince the court that she never intended to visit right from the moment she took the money. It's not about her changing her mind later or something coming up. It's about her state of mind, her intent, at the time she accepted the funds. Proving that's tough. Although this angle, obtaining money by false pretenses, maybe even fraud, it does sort of align with that T-Fare scammer narrative we saw pop up online, doesn't it? If Emmanuel could argue she took the money with zero intention of visiting, then yes, it looks like deception. Fraud, potentially. And the evidence, well, the money transfer itself is key. It shows the 150,000 changing hands linked to that specific understanding or promise.
That context is crucial. Okay, so we see Emmanuel's potential lines of argument. What about Jennifer? How could she or her legal team have pushed back, especially against such serious charges? What defenses might have been available?
Well, her main defense would probably center on the lack of a legally binding contract. The argument would be, this whole arrangement, the visit, the transport money, it was purely social. Friends, maybe? Not something intended to be legally enforceable in court. Was the promise specific enough? Did it have clear terms, like a set date, a time? Was there a mutual understanding of legal consequences if she didn't show? These details are vital. Without that clear intent to create a legal relationship, it remains just a social promise.
So it really boils down to intention, doesn't it? Did they both see this as a formal deal with legal teeth or just, a casual plan?
Exactly. That intention piece is often the crux of these kinds of disputes. And then if fraud was alleged, she could argue lack of criminal intent. She could say, look, I genuinely planned to visit, but something happened. Circumstances changed. No intent to deceive or defraud Emmanuel from the start. It's a subtle distinction, but legally massive. It separates a broken social promise, however disappointing, from an actual criminal act, which requires that specific mens rea, that guilty mind at the time.
And then there's the punishment itself. 450,000 in 7 years for 150,000 T-Fare. It just seems incredibly steep.
Oh, absolutely. A huge part of any defense would have to be challenging the proportionality of the punishment, it seems, excessive on its face. A fine 3 times the original amount, and potential 7-year jail term, for what started as a breach of promise over 150,000 guarantee other. The defense would strongly question if this sentence aligns with typical penalties for similar offenses in that jurisdiction. Is it standard, or is it an outlier? This is where judicial discretion and how specific statutes are interpreted really come into play. And finally, there's the argument that really resonated with a lot of public online, the private matter argument. Basically saying disputes like this, they belong between the individuals involved. They should be resolved privately, not clogging up the courts, and certainly not resulting in such harsh penalties. And, connecting this to the bigger picture, this ruling really forces us to think about that line. Where does a personal agreement end and legal accountability begin? Should every broken social promise potentially land someone in court facing serious time? It's a tough question.
That line between social and legal is definitely key here. And wow, it really ignited a firestorm online, didn't it? Like you said, people took sides, some cheering it on like, finally, justice against T-Fare scammers. Others were absolutely furious, calling it totally excessive punishment for what should have been a private issue. The internet was completely divided. This case, it really goes beyond just Jennifer and Emmanuel, doesn't it? It acts like a lens, showing us bigger things about society, how justice is changing, and just the sheer explosive power of viral culture today. What do you think this reflects about broader trends? Relationships, maybe? Expectations in our digital world?
Oh, it tells us so much. It's a real snapshot of shifting sands in modern interaction. Firstly, it really highlights the evolving nature of what a promise even means. Think about it. A social interaction, maybe just a conversation, suddenly gets formalized by a financial transfer. That digital payment, the 150,000 T-Fare, it can maybe unintentionally elevate the whole thing. It gives it a weight it might not have had before. Technology can kind of formalize these agreements that used to be purely based on trust, on social norms. It adds a layer of expectation, maybe bordering on contractual in some people's eyes.
So what might have been just a verbal agreement, a casual plan, now has this digital footprint, and that gives it a different kind of seriousness.
Precisely. That digital record, the transfer notification, it makes it tangible in a way a purely verbal promise isn't. And secondly, it's a powerful mirror reflecting the public perception of justice. That intense online debate, especially the whole T-Fare scammer narrative, It's not just about this one case. It exposes something deeper, doesn't it? A kind of societal frustration, maybe. A public desire for accountability in these informal deals where the law often doesn't step in. It shows how the justice system might be trying, perhaps awkwardly, to catch up with these evolving social contracts in our super digital world.
That's a really sharp insight. It's not just about these two people, but a wider anxiety about trust and deception in everyday dealings.
Absolutely. Finally, it just screams about the power of virality, undeniable. A legal case, maybe something that was a small local story, instantly becomes this massive cultural phenomenon. And that viral spread, it shapes public opinion, fuels debate, and even through memes and humor, it can influence how people perceive justice itself. It's almost like a parallel people's court running alongside the formal one. So you have to ask yourself, what does all this mean for you navigating this world where any private interaction could potentially blow up publicly with real, sometimes severe legal consequences?
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to chew on, isn't it? That surprising judgment against Jennifer, the whole legal interpretation of breach of promise in this very specific, maybe unusual context, just the incredible power of one image, one expression to ignite a national conversation, create a lasting meme. It all converges here.
This deep dive, it really makes you think about that blurry line, doesn't it, between social agreements and actual legal contracts. It shows how seemingly small things like accepting money for transport can spiral into something with massive consequences, especially when social media gets hold of it and just amplifies everything, globally even.
Indeed. And it leaves us with maybe a provocative thought to consider. In a world where almost anything can be recorded, shared, go viral, and where these informal agreements can suddenly land people in courtrooms facing really serious penalties, how do we even begin to redefine things like trust, responsibility, and crucially, the boundaries of where the law should intervene in our personal lives? What does this specific case prompt you to reconsider about the agreements you make, big or small, and the expectations, both social and maybe, just maybe legal, that come attached?